This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 43.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramzi Majaba. Ramzi hates horror movies. He thinks they're just bad comedy.
Hello, SE Nation, and welcome to the latest and greatest episode. If this is the first time listening to the show, my name is Ramzi Majaba, and I'm a sales engineer out of freezing Ottawa, Canada. And my goal is to be a resource or provide a resource for sales engineers when it comes to discovery, demos, interpersonal relationships, or whatever other topics we as SEs struggle with so we can all learn and grow together. This is show 43, and all the show notes for today's show will be at wethesalesengineers.com/show43. And just as a freebie, if you're interested in writing a resume that will help you get interviews, it's helped me in the past. And I know it's usually difficult to get interviews via resume. Just check out wethses.com/awesome-resume and download the sample resume available there. Now let's talk about the show. Today's guest is Mark the Joy Machine Green. Not sure what to say about this episode other than it is unique. Mark is unique in the best way possible. He loves what he does, and he loves helping people and making them laugh, which is why he calls himself the Joy Machine. He brings joy to people. He's a machine of joy, hence Joy Machine. In today's episode, we focus a lot on storytelling to help customers see how a solution can solve their problem. It's very different from the technique that I use. And as we were discussing this, I was having a hard time actually seeing what he was talking about. So I asked Mark to do a bit of a role play where I'm the customer, and he used that technique to discuss the benefits of his solution. And as a joke, I mentioned that I was ready to buy. It was really effective. It was a joke, but what he did actually helped me see the value of what he was offering. And I cannot wait for you to hear this interview, so let's jump right in. Good morning or good afternoon, Mark. How's it going?
Good afternoon. It's going very well. Thank you for having me on.
It is my pleasure. So you are in the UK?
That's correct, yes, in London.
Okay, so that's why it's my morning, your afternoon. If you don't mind, other than that you're in the UK, do you mind telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure thing. Yes, so I'm Mark Green. I'm currently and I've been for a long, long time, a solution consultant for Sage. Loving it there, and whether you call it solution consultant or pre-sales or sales engineer, I'm sure we've all been through that interesting conundrum. I spent my career in two halves. So the first half of my career, I was in IT support, supporting users with all of the technical problems that they had. So spent far too long scrabbling underneath desks, plugging stuff into floor boxes. But then changed halfway through my career and became technical pre-sales. And that's because I love explaining technical concepts to people, and whether they are staff and colleagues and users or customers, the concepts and the point is very, very similar. I started out at IBM. I think probably mostly everyone has worked for IBM at some point or is destined to. Then went to EDS, who no longer exist. Then worked for Infor for 10 years, and that was where I changed into becoming technical pre-sales, and learned a huge amount there. And now, as I said, work for Sage.
Okay, so you worked for pretty much two organizations as a sales engineer or solutions consultant, and the rest were in IT. Okay, so one, how did you change from being in IT? How did you make the decision, other than you enjoy explaining stuff to people, and how did you actually go about getting the job as a sales engineer or a solution consultant?
So I got the job because of a desire to take my customer service to the next level. I'm very much, I can do the technology. So the technology, thankfully, comes quite easily to me. But the thing that really drives my passion for it is the psychology and the interaction between people. So as you can imagine, you've got an IT team in a company, and there's the interaction between the users and the support team. And when you get really, really good support, it's not because they've necessarily fixed the problem any quicker, but because they've done it in a way that makes you feel valued and happy. And if it was a really technical problem or an easy one, they don't make you feel stupid. And that was something which was recognized by one of my friends in the office. Coupled with the fact that when I turned 30, I decided to religiously just wear suits into work instead of just black trousers and a whatever corporate t-shirt I could find. I decided to make that change because I wanted to change the trajectory. And it worked. And it meant that when you had that casual conversation with the pre-sales director in the corridor, oh, well, what are you doing, Mark? How's things? What do you think about this? It's unfortunate because we're all the same people underneath the clothes, but a lot of people say dress for the job you want, or be the job you want, and I did, and it worked, and I ended up in technical pre-sales.
Yeah, so act as if. So you actually wore a suit to work?
Yeah, oh yeah, and it's possibly more frequent in the UK than in the States and Canada. I don't know. My brother is across the pond, shall we say?
Yeah.
Although he is a long way from you, down in the southern states in Texas.
Okay.
But smart there is a casual jacket, some jeans, and some cowboy boots.
Yeah.
Whereas the equivalent over here would be a sharp suit, not necessarily a tie, but as a IT support guy going around doing field service, plugging in stuff underneath people's desks, you rock up in a suit, and it's amazing how many people go, "Oh, I'll just unplug that for you." Now, I didn't do it for that, but it was a happy coincidence when it started to happen.
Okay.
People
So-
take you more seriously.
Yeah, so you exuded seriousness, I guess. So, all right. Well, what about when you did the change? How would you compare the new job of pre-sales to the old job of IT? Like, what did you enjoy? What didn't you enjoy? Like, which one's better for you?
What did I miss out on when I changed jobs? Going down the pub on a Friday lunchtime and having a fairly relaxed Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that if you're in, more of a professional customer-facing role, outwardly facing, and you are the public face of the company. It was a lot busier, a lot more corporate. Suddenly, you go from this cost center, which, don't get me wrong, I love IT more than most things, but it is a cost.
Yes.
To a business, whereas and you can't make money for the business. Where you go to a profit center, and suddenly you're making money for the business. You are in this world where the harder you work, the more difference you make to the company. So that was one of the most rewarding things, that it really feel like you can make a difference.
So being in a profit center versus a cost center.
Yes, and I don't know whether that's the correct terminology to use, but certainly it seemed it at the time.
Well, I do agree with you in the sense that when I worked in support as well, not for an IT company. I worked for Alcatel-Lucent, and no matter how hard you work, and I'm not thinking about in terms of making money for the company, I'm thinking about in terms of making money for my family. The more I work, the same amount of money comes in. Whereas as an SE, the more I work, the more I sell, the more I can provide for my family. So
that's very true. Yes.
So that's
try changing jobs within a company, and you'll soon realize that the only way to increase particularly is to leave,
Yes.
which is a sad thing. You build up a lot of loyalty being in a company for 10 years.
Well, I think there's a lot of bureaucracy within the company with HR or whatever, especially big ones, where there's a limit on how much of a raise they can give you if you move. So
Yes.
you're limited in that way. All right. So what would you describe? How would you describe your job today?
So today, being a solution consultant, I would describe it as an anomaly.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got a lot of colleagues which know a lot about finance, manufacturing, distribution, and I'm the tech guy. Only I'm the tech guy that they allow out in front of customers. So that's not always the case. And so I'm out there doing discoveries with customers or prospects, giving presentations, being part of workshops, and also sitting through thousands of questions of RFPs when they come in. But it's all part and parcel of the job, and I love it. I'm really fortunate that I get to go to work and do what I love.
To be clear, you're talking about there's a lot of people who know manufacturing, others know financials. Like it's not the same person who knows all this, but as
Correct.
SEs,
Yes.
we know all of that, or at least we have a basic idea of what all of it is. And
Yeah. So we have specialists that I work with.
Yep.
I would call them the what the software does.
Yeah.
And I might focus more on the how the software does it.
Yeah. Nice. So you mentioned we were talking earlier. How do you describe your job to new employees in your company?
Right. Well, someone actually did ask me in the office, and they had joined and they went round and they were doing the, oh, hello, who are you? What do you do? And all that. And I said, oh, hi, yeah, I'm Mark. I'm the Joy Machine.
Okay. So
And I don't think they were expecting that answer.
well,
Really.
honestly, this is the second time I hear this answer because we just talked about it earlier and I still didn't expect it. So can you explain why you are the Joy Machine?
Of course, yes. So I don't know if it's come across, but I'm a fairly happy person.
Not at all.
I'm really so I see my role in life, but certainly at work, to focus on two things. One is to make my colleagues happy, and that's by instilling trust, working with them, helping them, being productive with them, building great teamwork, and also the customers, making them happy, because what they really want is a system that works, that's not difficult, and they can get on with their job and do it more efficiently and get home to their families quicker. So if I can spread the joy around, then that's a good thing. And talking of family, I've also noted down that Joy Machine for family, because for me, that's one of the reasons that I do any of this.
Yeah. Just so you know, the Joy Machine is going to be the title of this episode.
Sure thing. No, that's quite all right. It's misunderstood by many people, but I think it's worth having something that makes people stop and go, hang on a minute, sorry, what did you say?
Well, it's a conversation starter, yeah.
And as much as perhaps it might be a bit of a joke, it does describe me quite well.
I can see that. So if someone asks you, like that new person, what does your week look like? How would you describe it?
So let's take a typical week, which was last week, I guess. So working on RFPs, and RFIs, so lots of requests coming in, trying to manage. So instead of doing it all in spreadsheets, now we have a system, so we can log those into a system and then allocate the questions out to the various people. So that makes it very, very much easier. So a lot of structure around that. So I like structuring those. So I do that. Um, we recently had a pitching day, and that pitching day uh, meant that we got a lot of the sales team and a lot of the solution consulting team together, paired up to give pitches. And then this was all internal, and then feedback to each other. Because it's not often that we always get to see each other pitching. And the reason I use pitching rather than demoing is that it's not just a demo. It's that interaction. It's arriving. What's the how are you dressed? Have you sent an email to them beforehand? Have you brought any collateral with you? What do you like up in front of them? The one that I did, for example, I didn't use any slides.
Okay.
So I did show some software, but myself and my colleague, we just whiteboarded it. And it was great the way that we could build up the story as we went along. And it was there for people to see how far through we'd got. And it was a very descriptive way of doing it. Now, we only had 15 minutes. So it's a fairly long elevator pitch, but it's pretty short for a demo. And that was quite good. It was quite good to practice getting it into a concise message.
So when you say pitching day, is that like role playing where someone's pretending to be a customer? Okay. And
yeah, so we were allocated little companies, and we took on those personas and we told stories around them.
How often do you do that sort of thing?
More and more. I think it's really good to do dry runs, to do workshops, especially internally in the team. If you've just practiced something and you've got a little bit, maybe it's a new functionality in the system, maybe it's a new way that you want to talk about something. Practice amongst your colleagues.
Yep.
Carmine Gallo says about presenting in an excellent book called Talk Like TED, that you really have to practice. And you can talk in front of the mirror and you can talk out loud and walk around, but give the demo to anyone that will listen. And it's amazing how you'll find things. You'll stop halfway through your pitch and you're going, oh, actually, no, I probably shouldn't describe it like that. Oh, maybe I should do this. And the more you do it, the less of those you have.
Yep.
So we do a lot of that, and it's brilliant.
Okay. And I'm very curious how I come from a networking world. So when I whiteboard, I'm whiteboarding like routers and switches and that sort of thing. And are you in a like hardware world or software?
A bit of both. So we were talking about business concepts, and those are affected by systems, and those systems are on cloud hardware, provisioned software, and then managed services. So it's a bit of both. But no, you're right. It's not an actual whiteboard of the rotors themselves and the servers, etc. I can do that, but it was a different audience.
Right.
And I too remember my CCNA days and my networking, but I did it so long ago that wireless wasn't part of the curriculum.
Right. Yeah. So what you whiteboarded, was it software mostly? Or was it concepts? What I'm curious how folks who
it was mainly concepts.
Okay.
So I split it into three sections. The first was showing an understanding of this, and it was actually a fake customer that we were given for the role play, but understanding the pains that they had. Then in the middle, some of the areas of benefit that we could bring. So you do a bit of the solution architecting bit with various bits of software and reasons for that. And then what that then looks like as successful outcomes for the customer then. So we've taken the pains, we've understood them, we've figured out a way to move forward, and then we've described the successes that they can bring. And that three-step approach, taking them on that little journey, seems to work quite well.
That basically tells me what you're doing is, instead, everything that most people would have provided via a PowerPoint presentation, you just whiteboarded and wrote in front of the customer, like as an interactive session.
Yeah, yeah.
How was that received? Was it received better than a PowerPoint presentation, you would say?
Oh yeah, it
Okay.
went down like a storm. It was so good. I've got to give credit to my other colleague. It wasn't,
I just
it,
take it. Just take all the
it was
credit.
him and me. But no, it was really good and it was refreshing because so many people will put up loads of slides. Now, uh, Tim Cook said, get rid of bullet points. And I couldn't agree more. I think we should get rid of bullet points and get rid of agendas. Unless you've got a whole day worth of meeting, just tell them what you're going to tell them.
Right.
They're in front of you. They're real people. They have lives. They're tired, happy, excited, whatever. Interact with them rather than just stand there and let the technology do it for you. I'm a big fan of that and of the storytelling.
You did a presentation. Instead of doing a presentation, you did a whiteboard session, and you said you took them through a journey. Could you describe how one would take someone else through a journey? Because I've heard a lot of people say that, and at the end of the meeting, after saying that they're going to take him on a journey, we end up in the same place as we started. So, journey.
Yes, no, exactly. Our lives are filled with buzzwords. And so you're right. Let's explain that one. And if I may, I'm going to use the story of Cinderella and Icarus.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. I'm also going to cough, so hang on.
All right.
There we go, sorted. Back in the room.
You just made me spit out my water.
Well, hopefully I'm muted.
Yeah, you were. So you're good.
Okay, good. Otherwise, I've just deafened everybody. So we've got Cinderella and Icarus. So this journey that we go on is very much like their stories. Now we all know the story of Cinderella. There was a rise in it, so she had a great. So we were introduced to a hero, which is her. They introduced a baddie, created some tension, and then provided the release at the end, where she found the the prince. Whereas Icarus was in prison, got his wings after ages of making them, flew too high to the sun, flying away from prison, and was like, oh yes, I've made it. Flew too high, wings melted, crashed into the sea. And what I find is that if you're not careful when you're taking customers on this journey, throughout your whiteboard or throughout slides or whatever, it's all very easy to talk about the pains at the start, and then talk about the wonderful new world that we can provide for you. But you have to be really careful it doesn't tail off at the end and not be exciting, because then the moment that you're asking them to do something, whether it's sign a piece of paper or whatever your call to action is when the mood of the room has gone down again. That's not what we want. What we would prefer is for the mood of the room to be right at the end, right at the rise of this story arc, and that's when you have the call to action, when the hero has come along and is solved whatever tension you created by bringing out some pains or a time-based worry that you've got to get all of this stuff by a certain time and all the rest of it. You've created that tension. Suddenly there's release, and that is when everyone is feeling excited. That's when you say, right, so now we'd like to come back and do a full day workshop with you. And they're like, yeah, okay. So in answer to your question about this storyboard, what stops it just being a bit of a buzzword? It's because you have to craft the story first, then do all the slides or the story or the whiteboard.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. Is there a system that you use to craft the story?
Yes.
What's the best way to craft the story in your mind?
So for me, there are there are five parts of it. So let's take an example of me ordering a bicycle. Okay, so I'm going to go down to my local bike shop and I'm going to see Neil. Neil is the bike shop guy, and I've got a charity ride coming up, and I need to have a bike, and I've decided I'm going to get this bike, and I order it, and he goes, "Well, it's out of stock." Suddenly, so we've got the good bit, right? So charity ride, we've got our hero, which rather self-indulgently I think has turned out to be me in this story. We've got the baddie. Okay, so that's the manufacturing issue, so it's not in stock. So we've got the first two bits, and the tension is the fact that the charity ride is in 2 weeks' time.
Right.
So you're like, what are we going to do? We've got all of this manufacturing issue. We're going to have to sort it out. The customer needs it by this date, and all this tension is building up in the thoughts and the minds of the people that you're talking to, and whatever example it is that you come up to describe to them that's relevant to their business. So we've got the first three. So the last two bits, we've got the person that comes along. You've been rooting for me, but the hero of the day is the production manager. So the production manager comes along and goes, look, I can reschedule these works that are going on in the factory. I can figure it out. Got all the parts there. We can get there in time. And the release at the end is that the bike gets to the bike shop, gets to the customer, and the customer goes and does the charity ride, and they make lots of money for charity. So those are the 5 steps that I use to build any story that I do. And you can actually look these up. I would love to lay claim to this being my idea, but it's not. This was actually the University of Vermont's computational story lab. They came up with an idea to take over 50,000 Project Gutenberg ebooks, and they scanned them all in, and they filtered those down to 18,000 fiction books. And then they went all through all of this processing to look at the stories and which words were used. And they said that they came up with 6 different stories. All of the books that they could find filtered down to just 6 stories. Rags to riches. So it's just a rise.
Yep.
Tragedy, which is just someone starts really good at the start and then ends up at the bottom. Well, we don't want to use that in sales messaging, really. And some other ones, including Cinderella. And so that's the one that I use, and it seems to work quite well.
So you prefer Cinderella over Icarus?
I definitely prefer going to the ball than falling into the sea. Yes.
Yes, that's a good preference. I would
Yes.
second that. So when you're in front of a customer and you're doing this, you're creating the structure for the story. Are you using the customer as the characters, or like who's the hero in the customer's eyes when you're building that in front of them?
It depends how well you know them, because if you've done a proper discovery and you've had the opportunity to go and do a discovery, then you can use some of their own examples. And anything that you use as the baddie, it's fine because they told you that they have these problems. If you rock up as software company man and say, hi, look at all this terrible things that you're doing,
Yep, that's a good way of putting it.
that doesn't go down very well. So if you know them and you know that they have problems, then you can discuss them and you can use that as a story. Other than that, if you can use a story that is personal to yourself, that's even better. Because you'll always give it more color. You'll always talk about it with authority and you can expand upon it. And that's telling stories from your own experience always goes down well. It's not always possible when you're trying to prove a particular point. If you can, it's good.
So if the customer already provided you some pains, or you uncovered some pains for the customer, Is there such a thing as, when you're whiteboarding the session, is there such a thing as putting up too much paint on the board?
No.
No?
No, I don't think so. I think that might sound quite bold, but so many companies, when you go in and you do a discovery, there are pains that are obvious, and there are pains that they won't admit to themselves. So they're in a room, and these are the people that are responsible for making the company a success. Now, you probably don't want to lay it on too thick, but I think putting up a good lot of pains, if you are able to easily demonstrate how you can solve them for them, then that's fine.
How do you get
It
them?
does
Go ahead.
it does help if you have done the discovery to get the pains. If you're just picking them out of nowhere because you've not done a discovery, then it's probably better to come up with some generic ones that businesses can have in their industry.
How do you get them to admit pain that you said that they will not admit in the group?
Because you don't name people. You don't say, "Oh, Bill said that the manufacturing team were terrible, and James said this and all that." You talk about the issues that have been discussed, and so you would say, "We've come in and we've done a lot of discovery with your teams, and we've sat with some people, and we've gone through we've stood in your warehouse and followed some things through. We've highlighted these areas, and I don't think people mind because they are busy people. They don't often have time to do a risk analysis on the amount of stock that's sitting before it's put away."
So it's pain that you've observed, not necessarily that they've admitted. And then you put it on the board and tell them, hey, we noticed this. There's nothing malicious about that. It's just something that we noticed.
No, because you've got to be very. I mean, I'm very open and honest and upfront,
Yep, I can see that.
and that's just the way that that I am and come across. So I don't say it in a way that is to make anyone feel bad. I say, well, this is the lie of the land. This is what we saw, and then you ask them, do they agree with this? Because they might say that they don't agree with one of them, in which case that's fine. That opens up the discussion, and you can have a chat about it.
All right. So going back to storytelling, are you creating characters, or are you just talking about, like, when I talked to Rui on show 35, which you mentioned that you listened to, he talked about storytelling. He talked about creating, like, the characters where some of the people in the room are the actual heroes, where he brings them in that, hey, you did this and you solved the problem, or you're running into this problem and then you solved it. Are you doing something like that as well, or you have a different type of storytelling that you usually do in front of the customer?
Well, we do a few different ones. So sometimes we run events, and we make all of the personas up because there might be more than one customer that's come to the showcase. So we don't want to make it specific. Sometimes we can bring in examples of who could be the hero. So if there is a production manager, then we could pick on that person. It's very much a feeling thing, though. It depends who the person is, how familiar you are with them. You don't want it to be overly familiar, but if you get people on board with the story and the scenario right at the start, people don't really mind. I was at a demo once, and I used the fact that we had a buyer there for a particular piece of clothing, and she'd come in wearing the latest and greatest product, and all of her colleagues commented, "Oh, is that the new XYZ?" So then in my presentation, on my demo, I used that concept of the new product to apparent great effect. But yeah, I think it depends.
Okay. Can we do a bit of a role play then, you and I?
If you like.
All right. So let's say I'm the customer, and I don't know what kind of problems like I would have in your domain. Can you give me an example of some form of problem that you would solve?
You could have a problem where you look at, so you could be the guy in charge of all of the networking
Okay.
of for a company, and it could be a scenario where you're looking to offload some of that work because keeping your data center up to speed with all of the latest and greatest is fine, but you would rather be doing some other things, perhaps.
All right. So that's my problem, which
Hmm.
you defined. How would you go about doing the storytelling for this kind of situation? I know I'm putting you on the spot. If you don't want to do this, we can like.
No, that's fine. Okay, so what I would do is I would probably have, by the time I was coming in to do a demo to you, I would probably have already spoken to you and done a bit of discovery and worked with you. And I think that if you're in charge of all of the networking for your company, I would imagine you're fairly clued up about what's going on.
Yes.
And you have expressed a desire to offload some of that responsibility.
Yep.
So I would take a story where I was in Sydney a few years back, okay? And it was actually on my birthday. I had my birthday cards lined up on the hotel window, and in the background was the Sydney Opera House. It was a good day, apart from the fact that I was on my own, so not as fun. But thankfully, a colleague joined me soon after. But the problem was, we were out there to do some training, okay? And we were out there to give training to lots of partners. We were going to show them how to install a new bit of software and get it configured and all working, and it would all be shiny and wonderful, and then they'd gone and sell lots of it. It was Sunday afternoon when we had arrived, jet lagged like you wouldn't believe, and we checked the servers. Now, the servers were in the UK, and what had happened is one of the network controllers in the server room had died, but there was no backup network controller for it, and it was a Sunday, so no one could go in and fix it. And when we tried to get hold of someone, they weren't going to be able to do it because they didn't have spares. They'd have to call their support team and get someone like next day service. But we had training to give on the Monday. So what did we do? Well, we had access, even though this was quite a while ago. We were fairly early adopters to the Amazon Web Services platform. We had a whole load of servers that we could fire up on AWS and provide the servers that people could then use to install this new software. So we jumped online and we sat in the hotel lobby with lots of cups of tea and coffee and club sandwiches and got it all configured and had a very late night. But the next day, in the morning, we arrived and all the partners arrived and we gave the training and it all worked and it was brilliant. And so offloading the responsibility of your networking is not because you can't do it or that necessarily you could do it any better or worse, but having something which has the reliability and the flexibility of Amazon Web Services means that that's another thing you don't have to worry about. So I would craft a story like that, and that was a true story. I did go to Sydney. It was my birthday.
Happy birthday.
And I would use a real story.
So that was like I felt like I wanted to buy AWS right now. So that was very good. That was a very good example. So I appreciate.
Well,
that.
I don't work for them, but you can. But we do use them at Sage.
Yeah, but no, like that's a very good example of like, hey, you're having a problem with your network. If you use we do that all the time in my company as well. Like, why do you want to do it yourself? You're gonna have to be stuck fixing that problem, and that's not your strength. Your strength is somewhere else. So let us take care of that, and you focus on your strength. But yeah, you did that way better than I just did.
A lot of people worry that you're going to come in and say you don't need all your IT staff.
Yeah.
But these IT staff are brilliant at all sorts of things, not just the things that they currently do.
Yeah.
So you can offload some of the boring stuff, like changing backup tapes and going and sitting waiting for one of those backup tape machines that you had like 10 slots on a little machine. You had to wait for all the backup tapes to come out every Friday afternoon, and then taking that downstairs, putting them in the safe, and then sticking some in reception.
That's a very good point to highlight also, that you're not taking someone's job away. You're just letting them be more efficient at what they do today. Like they probably hate doing that part, sitting in front of it and trying to change tape.
I was really, really happy when I changed jobs and I didn't have to do the backup tapes
Exactly.
anymore.
So if you
I'm thinking about data now, we would just take all this data and just leave it in reception. Like anyone would just walk through. Like I'm fairly sure that shouldn't happen now.
That's very secure. All right. Okay. Well, that's a good way to transition. That was perfect, and I thank you for that. So I'll transition to the not so fire round, which, from what I've seen, you've already answered one question, but let's go through them. So, other than a notebook and a pen, what is an essential tool a sales engineer should be using?
I'm going to go with the stereotypically classic ears.
Okay. All right.
So I think your ears, but I think it really should be coupled with your brain as
That's
well.
a very good point. Yeah. So we use your bodily functions. Yeah, that's good. All right. Is there a book? You already mentioned one, but are there other books or resources that every SE should read?
Yes, definitely. So I have one in front of me, exactly. In fact, as if I knew that you were likely to ask me.
What are the odds?
I am currently reading, so I can't tell you the end, but I bet it's exciting. Tom Goodwin's Digital Darwinism. And it's subtitled Survival of the Fittest in the Age of Business Disruption. Okay, so it's a modern book. Like, it is a very recent book. Sales books are or at least a lot of them that people say, oh, you've got to read this. It's seen me through the last 30 years. Well, that's great, but could I have one that's a bit more relevant today, please? So this one is pretty relevant. I think it was from 2018, or at least 2017, and it's got a good quote in here that I'm going to say. So most of the book is about disruption and change. And it's something that we should all be aware of. And we're told that by our marketing executives that we need to disrupt the market and all that jazz.
Yep.
However, we need to remember that 1/3 of people in the US still rent and buy DVDs. And that really surprised me. I sit here, I haven't rented a DVD in goodness knows how long, and everything's on Netflix and Amazon.
Yep.
But some companies and some customers aren't there yet, and so you go into a company and go, oh look, we've got all this business intelligence, all this new stuff, and you can do all this and that, and they're like, well, my part of the business seems to work quite well on the spreadsheet.
Oh.
So some things don't need to change. A lot of things do, but I would recommend the first quarter of this book. The last 3 quarters, you will have to catch me on social media to find out how it goes.
What is your social media? Like, how do we follow you?
I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on there under my name. Less frequently, I am on Twitter as Green Photos.
Green Photos.
Green Photos, which is a nod to what I did part-time before my whole world got taken up with pre-sales.
Okay. All right. So you were a photographer, like for fun?
Yes. I'll tell you what. There's nothing There's nothing more scary than shooting a wedding on film. When they walk down the aisle, you better get that shot. Because if you miss the shot, you better have your passport in your camera bag, because you are going to have to leave the country, because she is coming after you.
Did you miss the shot? Did you miss it?
Thankfully, I never have.
Okay.
But weddings are stressful things.
I would have thought you immigrated somewhere just because of that. All right. Next question. Do you have any tips or tricks for time management and task organization?
Yes. Task organization, OneNote. I particularly like it because you can click anywhere on the screen and write it down. It gets you out of this structured, which heading do I put it under? How do I organize my notes and my thoughts? My thoughts aren't linear. They go off all over the place. So OneNote particularly is very, very useful. And then just putting stuff in the calendar of what you've done. Fairly boring, I know, but that's I find it quite good.
That's perfect. You're the first one to actually mention OneNote. Almost everybody else talks about Evernote. How do you find stuff if your thoughts are not linear and you just click anywhere and write something? If you're searching for something that you wrote, how do you find it?
Well, they are categorized.
Okay.
But the page itself, you can click anywhere on.
Okay.
And write a note there.
All right, sounds good. Last question: what advice would you give an SE that you feel they don't get from anybody else, other than the read the Digital Darwinism book?
I would strive to connect with your colleagues. So one of the reasons that I found you and your podcast was because you see so many different jobs and careers that have team building and events where people can get together and business networking. But sales is a difficult, fickle place because we're all competing against each other. Certainly in the most relevant area, which is, for me, software sales. All my software sales industry buddies are all competitors. So it's a difficult thing to manage, but I think that it's one of the most useful things that we can do. So Don Carmichael, as I'm part of his pre-sales leadership events, because he recognized that as well, that we really need to grow this art and talk to each other rather than be siloed. And in fact, I believe your website, looking at your about page, you wanted a similar resource.
Yep.
So I think advice to a solution consultant would be learn from all of your colleagues.
Not just the ones in your company. I think that's the biggest differentiator that you're doing.
Yes. For me, I don't have a counterpart. So I'm technical pre-sales, and there is one of me.
Wow. Okay.
So I have lots of other people that do that. I've got technical colleagues and all the rest of it, but none that are in the UK business where I am. Okay. So the ability to check on LinkedIn for interesting articles. Obviously, I err on the psychology of sales, so I'm interested in whenever there's an article that comes up like that. But it's a good little community that we've got, I think.
Yeah, trying to build it even more. All right, so that's it. That's all my questions for you today. I appreciate it. I appreciate you being flexible and letting me work through my computer issues. So, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the time, the opportunity, and for what you do for this industry. I think it's great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It means a lot. Take care now. So yeah, that was our show for today. I love doing the role play with Mark. He had done a great job talking about the technique, but it's very different seeing it in action. And for me, to start thinking about where I can use it and how I can use it was a great help. Like I was like as he was talking, I was trying to decipher which customers I can use this with to help them understand what we do. So thanks, Mark, for coming on and providing so much value. I love doing this podcast because I learn a lot from people like Mark. And I know I said he was unique, and he is, but almost everyone who's been on the show is unique in their own right, in one way or another. So thank you guys for listening. I appreciate you being here. I hope you're getting value out of these podcasts and also the blogs that I'm writing on a regular basis. If you are and you think they would be useful to somebody else, please share them, whether it's via LinkedIn or Twitter. If you do tweet them, like tag me, at we the SEs, or you can simply review the podcast, and that will help people understand what's going on here and what they would benefit out of this. So that's it for today. I thank you guys for being here. I love doing this podcast, so thank you for the words of encouragement. With that, this is Ramsey signing off.